Hey, everybody, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. It's always fun every once in a while when we actually remember to have guests and not just talk about ourselves. So that's what we're doing. Today's guest is Jeff Haskell, J.H. Haskell, and we met Jeff at S3 at the Story Shop Summit, along with some other cool folks. I can't remember. I feel like there are some other folks that we're maybe going to have eventually. Well, whatever. We'll find out if that happens. But anyway, thanks
Rachel,
for coming on.
We had a really good time with Rachel. She'd be a great guest.
There you go. And we will have her on. So welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I had a blast in Texas, and you guys were awesome. So it's fun to be on a show.
Right before we started, I was trying to get some logistics straight, and Jeff was like, "Well, you can refer to me this way or that way." And I said, "Well, it's way too pro. Like, I'm not going to be able to introduce you. So I'll let you introduce yourself, and then after you do that, we do a short segment where we announce something cool that we discovered this week. So if you have any, you can be thinking on that while we're doing ours. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself."
Sure. My author name is Jeffrey H Haskell, which is just my legal name. I've been writing for
How do we know that's
years.
not a lie?
It doesn't sound fake.
All right. Not like
That's
Johnny
the
B.
best
Truitt,
fake
right?
names.
Or David W. Wright.
Yeah.
One of my favorite fake names is somebody with the last name of Tamer, who writes in Lit RPG. I thought that was like right on. Like, yeah, that's your real name. I write superhero science fiction and a little bit of nonfiction, and I'm branching out into military sci-fi this year. And I've been writing I've been writing my whole life, but I've been publishing for about 3.5 years. I got started with Amazon's Kindle Press, was Kindle Scout, and I got accepted through their program in July of 2016 and published September of the same year. And then I started publishing my own stuff July the next year, and I haven't stopped since.
So you did Scout before your own stuff?
Yes.
That's interesting. How did that happen exactly?
Well, this isn't an accident per se. My whole thing about writing is when I decided that, so I had this sort of interesting experience. Like, I don't have a college degree, and I wasn't ever really good at school, but I read a lot. I read everything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, there's two of you on this.
There's only one of them on the car, on the call.
Which one?
Johnny's the only one who graduated.
Well, no, I graduated. Dave, do you graduate high school, right, Dave?
Sort of.
Sort of. Oh, okay.
I graduated high school because of the Army. The Army is like, you have now graduated high school. Welcome to the Army. So I wasn't ever really good at school, but I read a lot. I mean, I read everything I could get my hands on growing up, from comic books to novels to nonfiction. And when
you read it for the articles?
No, I actually didn't read that. Couldn't afford it. But I read like Tom Clancy and Rob Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and just a huge variety of stuff, because where I was growing up, it was just like whatever was in the library, and so it wasn't like I didn't know there was a thing where people just stick to one genre and only read that one genre. So I read a lot.
Yeah.
And I've learned that now as a writer that most people just read one genre, and that's cool.
Yeah, that was pretty shocking for me too.
Yeah, right, because we're authors. It's a great lesson to remember that we're not our audience. And so because I wasn't very good at school, when I told people that I had dreamed about being an author, I got laughed at a lot. One teacher told me I was an insult to the written word, and another teacher, like in class, told me point blank, "You will never finish a novel. You're a terrible writer."
Wow.
And,
Did you murder them all or just a few of them?
Well, it was the 90s, and so it was like the only way to be an author was to get published through the big guys. And so, no, I believed them, and so I just worked crap jobs and tech support for most of my life. And then I lost my job because of illness, and I ended up writing, listening to Lindsay's podcast and reading her blog. My wife and I would do it together because my wife was a writer.
Lindsay Baroker,
yeah, her science fiction and fantasy marketing podcast, which is now the Six Figure Author podcast. And then I read Jane Friedman's blog, which was like so awesome to meet her in Texas, because she's one of the reasons why I got started on this. And so like 2015, I told my wife, I was like, listen, I was going to school at the time, and I was doing better this time, but I didn't want to get a degree and go work a slave job again. And so I told her, like, let's give me 1 year. If I can make money, if I can make a significant amount of money in 1 year as an author, then I'll keep doing it. And if not, I will go work McDonald's the rest of my life if I have to
Johnny
support
had
us.
a deal like that.
I did have a deal like that. It
Not
came under
exactly,
duress after I'd been at it for a while. She was like, okay, this isn't working. Now you have a few months.
Well, so a really interesting story is that I have a couple of mental illnesses that have led to that being my entire life. Try something for a couple months.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. I don't finish. I've been trying to write a screenplay for like 10 years at that point when I told her that deal. And so, and she was super supportive, and she absolutely helped me in every way. Most of what I've learned writing comes from the discussions with her and her knowledge about writing, because she reads all the books about writing and talks to all the people. And so it turns out, like during the course of my, no, this is my internet connection's unstable, so hopefully
You're good.
Okay.
It's okay. So's Dave.
During the course of my of that year, I learned a couple of things. I learned that I was ADD, and so I started taking medicine for it. And lo and behold, I could finish things. And also, what I learned recently is I have dyslexia, so that made it like even more of a challenge. Which is why my writing was never good, because I couldn't spell for crap, even though I knew that I had spelled the word right. And that's what dyslexia does, right? So, yeah, so I worked on 3 urban fantasies and a trilogy, because that's what everybody said, write a trilogy. And I listened to all that advice, and I had the 3rd one ready to go before the 1st one went to print. They only published the 1st one, but I published the 2nd one a month later and the 3rd one a month after that. And I learned a lot from it. I learned what editing was, and there's more to a good cover than just the way it looks, and all this stuff, and things about marketing, like what I call passive marketing, stuff you can do to make your works more attractive to readers, to the right readers. And from there, I started writing novellas for Lindsay Buroker and the big guy who writes military sci-fi, Jay Allen, in their Kindle worlds, because I was trying to get some of their fans. And then I realized that same year, 2016, 2017, was kind of the military sci-fi explosion. And, hundreds and hundreds. It wasn't just Chris. There was another individual responsible for it too, who writes Vampires in Space. And his books exploded. And then Glenn Stewart. And but Chris, a lot of it from Chris.
Well, Chris is the one who told everybody to write in those. I mean, not explicitly, but
he gave it as an example, and everybody said, example. I'm going to do the exact thing you do.
Yeah, right. Well, in Chris's defense, he did say in the book, don't do this. Do it with your own genre.
Oh, no, totally. It's not Chris's fault.
No, it's not.
Hold my beer.
The problem. No, it's exactly. It's not. It's never. It's never the problem. I mean, we understand that. We've given lots of examples over the time. It's like, hey, here's something that works, but please don't. It's like the episode question that we always get. How many words are in an episode? It's like, what story are you trying to tell? Because that's really the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I decided that I'd written a couple of superhero novels as trunk novels to that point, and I love superheroes. And there's a couple of really good ones, like Marion G. Harmon, Wearing the Cape. Of course, I'm on video, so I can't remember names at this moment. And Confessions of a D-List Supervillain. I love both of those. And so I'd read those like a couple of times, but I couldn't find anything else. And I'd had this great idea for a superhero about this woman who's in a wheelchair, who was a super smart engineer. And so she built herself a suit of armor to find her missing parents. And it took off like immediately the first month. I say took off. I sold 500 books in the first month and 1,000 in the second month. And since I had been working really hard to teach myself to write faster, I could release a book every 3 months or so. And so I did for the next 2 years until I got to like 7 books. And then I started a new series about a vigilante, totally different tone, different voice, first person past tense instead of present tense. So I could attract a different crowd and learn some really cool stuff there. Like 50% of my audience who read Arsenal did not go on to read Wraith, and vice versa. Like I would get people who'd never read Arsenal read Wraith, but only about half of them would then go on and read Arsenal, which was interesting.
You ever figure out why?
Yeah, tone. It was all about tone. They wanted vigilante justice, and Wraith serves out vigilante justice from the barrel of a gun with no remorse or mercy. And they like that. And then Arsenal is all about hope and redemption and sacrifice and courage and things like that. And so that's been the last 3.5 years of my life, is writing those 2 book series. And then I wrote a nonfiction to help people find the path that I took, which is called Writing for Life, Living the Impossible Dream, available on Kindle Unlimited. So people can understand that you can do this, and you don't have to spend $10,000 of your own money to do this. You don't have to be a marketing whiz. You don't have to do advertising. You just have to do this. You have to succeed because you plan to succeed and not fail on accident.
Yeah, so that's I actually didn't know that you had that book. When we met in Austin, it was.
I don't talk about it too much.
Yeah,
I feel dirty shilling it to people. Like, hey, I'm Jeff Haskell. I wrote a writing book. You should buy it.
Yeah, we were talking at lunch, and you were talking about just kind of the temperature of the modern indie culture, which I'm very interested in. Not just the way books are sold, but how we all feel about it. And it seems like
98.6.
Yes, it was. There's just a lot of like apathy and aggression and entitlement and just a lot of.
Fuck you. There is not.
A lot of stuff that I really don't like, that I really didn't see, in 2011, 2012, 2013, when this was still new.
It wasn't there in 2015 when I started into it either.
Yeah, it's slowly soured more and more and more, where people are really they get aggressive when things aren't going their way. There's a lot of jealousy for authors who are doing well. There's a lot of just kind of shitty behavior out there. And everything that I heard you say during the 2 days when I heard you say anything was really positive. So it doesn't surprise me at all that you wrote a book about staying positive as a writer. But it's so against the grain of what I normally see, like chatter on forums, or just, you overhear just crazy bullshit.
Right.
In my mind, when I overhear that, I usually think that is not the DNA of somebody who makes it. It just isn't.
There's a pattern to success. You can almost predict what people who's going to be successful. And I don't mean the people who I wrote a book and I sold 10,000 copies. That's not success you can copy, right? I'm glad for them. I'm ecstatic for them.
But they may not even know why they sold those 10,000 copies.
Exactly. So that's not really something you can follow. One of my goals was to find authors that I wanted to be like Chris Fox and Lindsay Buroker and Jay Allen and all those guys, figure out where they were and how I could get from where I was to where they were. And not like strategy-wise, Chris wrote 3 books and then he wrote a nonfiction, and then okay, Chris is making, I don't know how much insane money he's making this year, but the year I followed him, he was $125,000. I was like, okay, that's where I want to be. How do I do that? How do I write books that people love using his strategies of know your audience, have the right cover? How do I do what Lindsay does, where every book she writes is just so dripping with character that her audience loves her books? She's not just someone who people read, she's someone who people follow. And that sort of was my goal.
So how did you intentionally go about that? Because that's a great mindset to have, but it seems like you've been really intentional. And I'll give everybody my favorite example, because this was really we weren't talking yet. I was on the other side of the table. I was with Johnny was on my right and Bonnie was right across from me, and we were all kind of talking. And then you're a loud talker.
Sorry.
No. All affection of the world. So am I. But I heard something that you said, and I was my head swiveled, and I picked up, and then I was eavesdropping from that point on. And then I made it a point to come talk to you later because, okay, you captured my interest. And you were talking about BookBub, which we all love BookBub. BookBub, if you land a BookBub, it can mean a lot, but it doesn't mean what it used to mean. And, when we had our second summit, David Gauguin was up in front of, he was doing his talk, and he was talking all about BookBub. And somebody who didn't know what BookBub was raised their hand and said, what's BookBub? And he stopped, and he looked at the audience how could anybody in this room not know what BookBub is? And he says, BookBub is the company that makes money rain on your face, right? And everybody laughed, because at that time, that kind of was the thing. And when we had Invasion, BookBub had turned into a money machine for us. We built a very solid funnel, and we would get a BookBub on that first book in the funnel. and we would have a 5-figure month every month that we got the ad for many months in a row. So it was really effective. But every single strategy gets diluted over time. That's just a fact of business. And you were talking about that in like a really just open, honest, exploratory way. Like, look, you can't just assume an ad is going to work, because now people are spending all this money on ads and they don't even ROI. They're not getting the visibility. So would you talk a little bit more about that? Do you get a lot of pushback when you're talking about not placing ads? Like, so how do you do you spend a lot of time around other authors, and how do you feel that your temperature compares to theirs, and how do you get through those conversations? Do you just kind of like recede a little bit and listen, or do you plant your flag in the ground and kind of take them to task?
Well, there's two communities, right? There's an author community, right? But there's communities within them, and there's hierarchies within those communities, and some of those hierarchies are based on how much money you make.
That's
well, you know, everything you do gives you ethos, right? It gives you credibility, and for some people, money is credibility, and it's absolutely partially legit. When you look at MD Cooper, who writes the Aeon 14 series, and he's making 7 figures, and he knows why he's making 7 figures. You know,
that's it. That's the difference.
That's
if
credibility,
somebody knows
right?
Why they're making the money, then that makes a lot of sense.
But he's also really open she's also really open and honest about why and how she makes that money. And it has to do with the number of hours she spends doing ads. Well, here's the thing. I am an author. I'm a writer. I love writing. I love creating worlds. I love coming up with stuff. I don't want to spend 20 hours a week doing ads like she does. I don't want to be Brian Meeks, who is a great guy and wonderful at ads and awesome at blurbs, who spends 20 to 30 hours a week tweaking ads. Same thing with Brian Cohen, who you guys met. Nicest dude in the world, really great. He spent 1,000 hours last year on his classes and courses and tweaking ads. And, you know, you can really go down the rabbit hole with ads. I'd rather be writing. So what you have to ask yourself is, what is the ROI of these ads? Am I spending $1,000 to make $1,500? Am I? Because could I spend that time creating more material and make that money anyways?
Well, an ad will make you money, but it has a half-life. And it's not the same as when you're done with an asset, you have that asset forever.
Do you know anyone who split their company's functions in half and spent like 4 years, say, doing the wrong thing with all their time?
Well, you know, what are all the people who are really successful say? There's no such thing as doing the wrong thing, because you're learning from it. And people who are successful fail more than they succeed.
For sure.
But they fail more than other people try. And that's sort of the thing. My first book was not a hit. I thought I had it made when Amazon published me. I was like, woohoo! And, you know,
we did too.
They did they did an ad on one of my books, and it got to 124 in the store. I have a screenshot of it. I was so excited. I was like, this is it. You know, I just made more money in a day than I ever had in a week of working the rest of my life. And then that was the only ad they ever ran again.
At least they ran one for you.
Yeah, well, Amazon Marketing and Amazon Press, they didn't talk to each other at all. It's different parts of the company.
Yeah, we found that too.
Yeah, we have an intimate knowledge of that relationship.
Right? And I loved all the people I worked with at Kindle Press and Kindle Worlds. They were so awesome and friendly. They just didn't have any control over the ad part of it. And that's that's where I learned my lesson.
It does make sense that the company wouldn't be able to talk to each other that way, though.
I mean, it's how
Dame doesn't talk to the rest of us.
Yeah.
Why would I?
You know, when every corporation I've ever worked for has been like that. The government was like that. Amazon, no different than anybody else. And so that's kind of like the step one where I learned that lesson. And step two was when I went to superheroes. Guess who doesn't have a big readership? Superheroes. It is a niche of a niche.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I thought they were like really big in books right now.
They want pictures, right?
No. Well, yeah, the movies are really popular. Marvel movies are awesome. And I often tell people, if you like the Marvel movies, you'll love my books. But I am a lifelong comic book reader and did not know that there was a superhero fiction outside of Marvel and DC tie-in novels until 2011. And that's when I read Marion G. Harmon's, there we go, Wearing the Cape. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a genre? Where have it been all my life? And that's because it didn't exist until Indies. Indies created that genre. There was no non-Marvel and DC superhero novels, with the exception of Peter Cline's X-Heroes, and I'm not entirely sure when that was published, but that's really good too. But his publisher dropped him recently, that he won't be doing any more of those because there's no money in the publish for the big publishers. Unless it's Marvel or DC, there's no money in it.
So how do you find enough readers to, make it work?
Well, I imagine it this way. When I was reading all the writing books and whatnot, one thing they always talked about was imagine who your reader is, right? Imagine your reader. And it's sort of esoteric, oh, my reader, okay, my reader is this person. But really what they mean is your reader has a set of traits, right? Your ideal reader has a set of traits. And for me, my ideal reader is someone who loved comic books as a kid, who is probably an adult, 24 to 64, which is where most of my readers are, who misses the way those comics used to make them feel as a kid, right? Who loved the action and the excitement and the team dynamics of those comic books, doesn't really care for the dark, edgy stuff that's going on now. So not Watchmen fans. And are looking for that in well-written fiction that they can easily digest in a day or two. That's my ideal reader. And so I wrote the book for and that also describes me, but it's also my ideal reader. And so I figured if I was like that, and there were other readers like that, the world is so freaking big, and there's so many people buying books right now. I mean, that there had to be at least 10,000 people, at least, in the world who wanted books like that. And if there were 10,000 people like that, then I could make a living. And it turns out there are more. At this point, I think I've sold 40,000 books. So, but superhero in our market, not huge. I'm one of a handful of people, and if someone's watching this podcast down the road, and they're like, "Well, I make money in superheroes." This is not meant to insult you, but there are a lot of superhero books, but there aren't a lot that are making money. And me, Kevin Hardman, Marion G. Harmon, a couple others make money at it, Darius Brasher, but not a lot of other people. And so I learned that lesson about ads. So I'm like trying to advertise my books, and I'm doing everything that everybody says to do ads, and they're not working. They look technically correct. You know what I mean? Like in Facebook, you have all these metrics. I was hitting all the metrics. I was hitting all the metrics in AMS ads. And everybody was always complaining about how Facebook spent all their money or AMS spent all their money, and I couldn't get them to spend $1. And but the people who were clicking on the ads were buying. I was hitting all the metrics. I just couldn't scale it up.
You couldn't scale, yeah.
And I figured that's because there just weren't a lot of people. There weren't enough people a pool to draw from. And so I was like, okay, so what I have to do then is I have to make my book say exactly what those people want when they're browsing for it on Amazon. At some point, someone is going to be on Amazon, and they're going to say, I want to read a superhero novel. So when they go to Amazon and they look up superhero novels and they see my book, they're going to go, that is exactly what I want. And that's how you do it without ads, is you have to intelligently craft your covers, you have to intelligently craft your blurbs, you have to set up your writing so that you're writing what people want to read. And it can also be stuff that you want to write, but it can't entirely be something you want to write. It's sort of like writing a market, but not in a cheap way.
Okay, so devil's advocate on that. How are people finding the books in the first place to know that they're what they want to read? How are you getting the visibility without ads?
Is it like an SEO thing? Like
well, okay, so part of it. So Dave Chesson has a great website called Kindlepreneur with lots of information about how to do SEO stuff. He does lots of scientific research. You guys met Dave in Texas. Yeah. Really nice guy, super cool. Very, very helpful, always willing to help. And I talked to him a lot about how to do it. And he did this study where he found that if you use up all of the 54 characters in every one of your keyword slots, Amazon likes you more than if you don't. So I did that. I worked on my blurbs. I always thought I was pretty good at blurbs until I met Brian Cohen and realized I wasn't. I was good accidentally occasionally. And so I bought a bunch of blurb books and worked on my blurb, and I changed those up occasionally. Now, I do have one advantage that most people don't have, and that is I'm fortunate enough to be married to someone who's been a graphic designer for 25 years. And she went from graphic design to cover art very, very easily, and now she's one of like a handful of people who actually illustrate in the business. And so she does my covers for me. So when we sat down and talked about the covers, I showed her a bunch of comic book covers, and I showed her a bunch of what they have, superhero covers they have now. And I said, the one thing it has to do, it has to say superhero. So all my superhero books are the Full Metal Superhero by Night. They have the name in them. And as for visibility, we think of people going on Amazon and searching for a specific book. And so like say someone goes on to Amazon and they're searching for Wearing the Cape because he sold millions of copies, right? They're searching for Wearing the Cape. And so traditionally thinking my Amazon ads should target Wearing the Cape so that when you search for Wearing the Cape, I'm the highest bidder and you see me, right? And you go, well, I could read Wearing the Cape, which is what I was searching for, but this girl in a wheelchair who looks like Iron Man, that sounds pretty cool. I'll read that. That's what we think, right, as authors, right? That's what we're programmed to think. But that's not actually how people search for books. How people search for books is they go to Amazon, and they search for books the same way they search the web. And Dave Chesson, again, he did some research on this, and he scientifically, and had like thousands of people come in and browse Amazon. They'll look at a book, and then they'll go to the Autobots, and then they'll look at a book in the Autobots, and then they'll start scrolling through the lists, right? Just scrolling through the list. They're not putting in search phrases. They're not putting in keywords. They're not going to authors that are super popular. They're just looking at that list. And they get to a book they like. You have 3 seconds to attract them, just 3. If your cover doesn't get them in 3 seconds, you don't get them as a reader. And 99% of my readers, that's how I find them, is they're just scrolling through Amazon, and they either saw me on somebody's also bots that they liked, or they were just scrolling through the superhero section, not the top 100, but just they typed in superheroes and started looking at the books and scroll up, page 2, page 3. And I was the book that said, oh, this is a superhero novel. I want to read this. But it also didn't look like a comic book. So they knew it wasn't a comic book.
Is there
and
anything
that's kind of what you have to do
specifically to get populated into other also bots where you want to show up?
Well, I mean, one of the tried and true methods is to get that author to send your book out, which works sometimes. I've done a couple of swaps with authors here and there, but a lot of authors don't even do swaps, believe it or not. I mean, we're on the high end of marketers, right? Where we're like the cutting edge of, we know what's going on because we're listening to all the podcasts and we're reading all the books. But, you know, I was helping an author the other day and he's like, so I need a newsletter before I publish my next book. And I'm like, well, how many books do you have out now? And he's like, 3. I'm like, yes, you need a newsletter right now. Why are you messing with ads? Get a newsletter, you know, because, you know, that's how you do it too.
Yeah, no, that's worth talking about for just a second, because
sure,
we really want to start like quadrupling down on ads. But the reason that we haven't is because there's no underlying strategy. You know, you can't start ads without a newsletter. I mean, you can, obviously, but if you're not capturing those readers and telling them where to go next, then you're really overspending on your ads.
You're shooting yourself in the foot, right? No, and not that, I mean, I'm going to talk about Dave Chesson a lot because he's a super smart guy, but all these guys are really smart. And Dave Chesson has this theory about turning readers into followers using your newsletter. So you really need to have a newsletter. And so to answer your question, Johnny, about visibility, I can't really tell you how to climb up to rank number 1 in the store to have visibility. Visibility comes when people buy your book, not the other way around, if that makes sense. And so you just need to make your book as attractive as possible, because when people are scrolling through the store, yes, most sales will come off that first page, but there's a whole lot of people who they've read, it's the same 6 books every time they scroll through the store, so they go on to the next page. And that's when you have a chance at capturing them. Whenever someone sees your book, they have to know instantly that that's the book you want. And so it all comes down to that cover, the blurb, and, you know, getting them to buy now. And
well, if you're anything like me, I mean, I will scroll through a bunch of pages because I'm so picky. I just don't read enough. And so it's like, well, it better be the perfect book. And I think there's a lot of noise out there on Amazon too. And I know that as a buyer.
Yeah. And so Dave did this study. It's really interesting to read on Kindlepreneur, where he had 1,000 people hooked up to computers and cameras, and the cameras watched their eyes and where their eyes went. And when they came across the cover they liked, they went from the cover to the title to click on the page to get to the book, to the blurb, to the buy now button. There was 950 people out of 1,000. That was their pattern. So that tells you what's important: the cover, title, blurb, buy now. And so it was statistically insignificant with the number of people who went to the look inside or went down to the reviews. So that kind of tells you like where you need to have your focus on. If your focus isn't on those 2 things, cover and blurb, then all the ads in the world aren't really going to help you. And then I think you'll find once your cover and blurb are spot on, you're going to start finding your audience, and that's going to help you get visibility. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes total sense. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg, though,
It
honestly.
is.
So I
It
mean,
really
you need
is.
to have those things in order. But if you go to the far extreme end, if you did that and you weren't in any also bots and you didn't have anything, you were just a ship alone out by yourself, nobody would see the awesome conversion elements. So that's kind of the trick.
Well, and see, then that's where things like pre-orders come in line, right? So Arsenal was successful because I had a 2-month pre-order on it. I did pre-order May 1st, and bear in mind, Arsenal was the first book I published under my name, right? It wasn't. All the books beforehand had been under a pen name, and so I had a 2-month pre-order on it. And by the time it was ready to go, I had like 150 pre-orders, and so that's 150 people who found that book just scrolling through Amazon. And so every time I've released a book since then, I've done at least a 1-month pre-order, and I've always had at least 100 to 400 pre-orders on every single book. And the entire time your book is on pre-order, then you're in the H&R list, right? And the H&R list is the hot new release list is really easy to get into. You don't have to be in the top 5,000 of the store because it's only the books that are coming out soon. So, sometimes you'll see the H&R list and the number 100 book on that will be like 2 million because it's a book that's coming out soon,
Mm-hmm.
and it's part of a genre that just doesn't have a lot of books released in it.
What I mean, we didn't talk directly about BookBub. I'm just a little curious because I think one of the things that's kind of doomed is so the wrong word. I don't mean that at all. But I think that BookBub looks like a big nuclear, like the big red button, right? Oh, all I have to do is get this one ad. I don't need to do any analysis. Right. I don't need to figure anything else. I don't need to line anything up. Like I submit, and if they accept me and my money, then I say go.
It's lazy marketing though, because as soon as that breaks or it's just not working as effectively as it was, you all of a sudden don't have a mechanism to move books.
Right. I mean, it seems like it's really become a piece of a strategy, which it always should have been, rather than the strategy, which is how people were using it.
Totally lazy if that's all you're relying on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any marketing, you should have a multi-pronged approach to all of your work, right? I mean, it shouldn't just be like, I'm going to rely on this one thing, because no one thing controls everything. And when I first got going, like really getting into the industry in between 2011 and 2015, before I was writing, but reading everything I could about it and following everybody and reading on like, what was that old forum that everybody used to go to before it imploded? Writers Cafe? I can't remember. But the BookBub was like the end all be all, right? People would talk about getting a BookBub and then making $20,000 the next month. And
the good old days,
right? Yeah. And, and then I got into a Facebook group with a bunch of really successful 6- and 7-figure authors. And I watched over a period of 2 years where it went from, I got a BookBub, I'm going to make $10,000 tomorrow, to I got a BookBub and I broke even. And so I watched that happen. And at the same time, if you go and you look at BookBub, what are they doing now? Well, they're selling a lot of ad space to traditional publishers, and they've got way deeper pockets than I do. I'm never going to be able to be like, yeah, BookBub, come book my, my $5.99 superhero novel, $4.99 superhero novel, for $800 when they could book a Marvel novel for, $15,000, because they can spend that kind of money on advertising one book. And that's kind of brings us back to AMS and Facebook ads, but mostly AMS. AMS is a competitive system. And last year at 20 Books, I sat there and 20 Books to 50K in Vegas, the conference, for those who don't know, whoever you are. I listened to 5 authors, 5 of some of the most successful authors in the world: Michael Anderle, Mark Dawson, Kevin J. Anderson, Dakota Kraut, and Shane Silvers, talk about the millions of dollars they were going to spend on AMS ads, the millions. And everybody I talked to at that conference, their takeaway was, yeah, I need to do ads. And I'm like, okay, well, do you write science fiction and fantasy? Because you know who wasn't on that stage? MD Cooper wasn't. But I know she spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads too. So I'm like, if you write science fiction and fantasy, please tell me your strategy for competing with those guys and girls. Like what are you're going to outbid Michael Anderle? You're going to outbid Shane Silver in urban fantasy? You're going to outbid Dakota Kraut in lit RPG? No, you're not. And I had a friend who was actually, I was helping with his humorous sci-fi book, And he's like, I'm targeting this author, but I'm not showing up in the sponsored ads. He's like, how long does it take for it to go into effect? I'm like, well, usually 3 days at most. He's like, well, it's been a week. And I go there, and sure enough, it was Michael Anderle books and M.D. Cooper books and A.K. DeBuff, who was nominated for a Nebula, and she spends money on advertising. All fantastic writers and all people you don't have the pockets to compete with. You just don't. So you have to come up with a way to sell books that is not based on AMS ads, and to some degree Facebook ads. I think Facebook ads probably work better for smaller authors than maybe AMS does for smaller authors.
So what would you say are the most important things to do that?
You mean to do for advertising?
No. To compete when you can't outbid, out-ad.
Well, so all things being equal, people buy a book based on its cover. So you got to have the best cover. I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but you got to have the best cover, and you got to be a better writer. And then I know indies don't like to talk about craft, but we're getting to the point in the gold rush where...
Is that a thing? Like indies don't like to talk about craft? Because we've noticed that anecdotally, but hearing you say it now makes me just a little bit sick.
Totally.
Like, as a group, you can make that blanket statement because it's so pathetic. That's kind of
aggressive. Look at Bonnie. Yes, in all caps. Right.
Okay, so
wait. Just there's two groups here. There's people who they are the true authors. They're storytellers. They're in it for the long haul. But there's this whole other group that is more concerned about selling books than
they might as well be playing arbitrage on the stock market or something. Like it doesn't matter that it's books.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and there are people like that. I can't talk to them. They're not who I
also think there are people who start out like well-meaning and they want to write and they want to improve their craft. They want to do that, but then they get, you get that first book bub, you get that first ad that works, you get the money coming in, you get used to the money coming in.
Man, if we're talking about you, please go do real estate or something. Like if you don't care, get the fuck out of books, because I actually care about my books.
Well, and I think there's two reasons. I think there's two reasons for that indies don't talk about craft. I love Bonnie's yes in all caps because.
Well, for the record, I really hope that you're right, because if the solution is to focus more on craft, okay, that I can do.
I honestly, I think that's part of it. That's definitely part of the solution because you guys know who Christine Catherine Roosh is, right?
Yes.
I'm just going to say KKR because her whole name is long. She's a wonderful human being. I've met her twice. She's amazing. I love that woman. So if she's watching this, hi.
We've had her on.
You're amazing. She wrote this whole long blog post, and she's been in the business for 40 years. She wrote this whole long blog post, a series of blog posts, about the economics of the gold rush and how it affects authors, right? And then we're at the point where, in the gold rush, where there are still people coming to be authors because they think there's money in it. And the impression is the only people making money.
They're standing in their river all day long with their
right. And the people who got here first are the ones who are like, hey, here's your pickaxe, $5. Here's your shovel, $5, right? So, like I said, well, all things being equal, how are you going to stand out as an author if there's two superhero novels and they're both $4.99, right? And we're spoiled for choice these days. Which one is the person going to pick? Are they going to pick the one with the crappy cover? Or are they going to pick the one with the good cover? Well, your parents may have told you not to judge a book by its cover, but we all do because we're visual people, right? So they're going to pick the book with the better cover. And if the covers are equal, they'll go to the blurbs. And if the blurbs are equal, they'll go in the look inside. And that's the cover and the blurb is something you can get somebody else to do if you're willing to pay the money. But that first paragraph, that's something you have to do.
I'm really glad that we're talking about this because it's as a reader. I mean, I mentioned this before, but I've given up trying to find books on Amazon. I just ask people I know because it's such a shit show out there. Like there's just so much stuff out there that's just a mess. And the idea that quality will to some degree win, hopefully, if we're right on this podcast, is great in my opinion.
No, I've been reading my whole life, right? When the Goodreads first came out, I was really excited to go and put all the books I'd ever read in there. And I think I got like 750 or something. And that was like 10 years ago. And then my wife put it in her books and she was like at 2,200 or something. And I'm just like, show off. But I thought I was well read until I met her. But the thing is indies don't like to talk about craft. So this is bringing back to my second thing about why indies don't want to talk about craft. number one is we're not all in this for the same reason, right? So some people are in it just for the money. Some people are in it for the love of doing it. Some people are in it for both. I like to think of myself as like 70-30, 70% because I love telling stories. I have my whole life. I was a DM for like every D&D game ever because that was the only way I could get a story told that I liked. And then 30% in it for the money because I got bills to pay and mouths to feed and money doesn't grow on trees, as the song goes. And so that's like the one thing, right? You don't ever really know who you're talking with. But two is, how do I put this? Indies don't know the difference. I say indies. Let me rephrase. Some people don't know the difference between good, objectively good, and what they like. For instance, Starship Troopers, the movie, right? I love that movie. I will, if I'm flipping channels and that movie's on, I will watch it every single time. Bad. That movie is awful. That is like one of the worst movies.
All Verhoeven movies are awful.
Ever made, but I enjoy it. That is the difference. Like Joker. Let's take Joker, for instance. Objectively, that is a good movie. It is well made. It has beautiful cinematography. It has themes that match from beginning to end. I hate that movie. I know you guys liked it. I hate it. All right? It ruined the Batman universe for me. I can't watch that movie knowing what I know about Batman and enjoy it. Like Joker might be Batman's brother. Who came up with that crap? Anyways, but I don't want to digress. So there's a difference between something being objectively good and something being to your taste, right? Some of my kids like broccoli. Some of my kids like carrots. They're both good. So Johnny, I'll use you as an example. You have that literary stuff that you write, right? Stuff. You have like a lit-fic pen name, right?
Yes, but it's a very small portion of what we do. But yes, I do.
Right. I hate lit-fic. I just don't like it. It's not. I've read a couple. I've never found one that I liked. So if I was to look at your book and read it and be like, "This book sucks, man. You need to go back to school," you would be like, "Dude, you don't know what you're talking about. This book is great," because I wouldn't know what I was talking about, right? And not only that, and by the way, none of your books suck. I'm sure you're a wonderful writer. Just FYI.
There you go. Okay, good. Good. Okay, I will send the release. It's okay.
What I have done. Exactly, right? You prove my point. What I have done is I have insulted you from a place of ignorance. I don't know litfic. I can't tell you what's a good litfic book or not. Just like you probably can't tell me what's a good superhero book or not.
Definitely not.
So that's part of our problem, right? We don't speak the same language. My wife talks about covers like they're a language, right? Chris Fox gave this great talk about coding, that covers are nothing but codes. And my wife says things similar. It's a language. If you go into a bank and you try to speak Greek to a person who doesn't speak Greek, it doesn't matter that your language is beautiful and eloquent and one of the oldest languages on the earth. The person who is going to give you money does not understand what you're saying, and so therefore they don't give you money. So
unless you have it gone, everyone understands that.
Our cover designer Dan is listening right now, and he says covers are communication.
Covers are communications. Right. Dan sounds like a really smart guy. Dan, you should meet my wife, Rebecca Haskell. She does vividcovers.com. She's an illustrator, and she's been doing design her whole life. And so that's what she's always telling her clients, right? Covers are communications, and half of my success comes from her covers. And the other half comes from me knowing what people want to read when it comes to superhero. So I can't rely on ads. I can't rely on Facebook to sell my books, especially with them always changing their algorithms. Like every year I've been in this business, sometime between July and December, all of a sudden there's an apocalypse. You guys know what I'm talking about? You remember 2016? All of a sudden everybody was just imploding at the end of the year about how nobody was making money. And this was it. It was all over. Amazon was screwing everybody over. It was the page flip or whatever. Turns out people over on Google were saying the same thing for YouTube views at the same time. It wasn't anybody doing anything specifically. There was just a shift in the market. There was a sea change. Same thing with 2017. Same thing with 2018. Same thing last year in November. Or October, I think. Everything took a dive.
It's SEO. It's SEO. That's all it is.
So if you rely on all that to sell your books, if you rely on those ads and you're spending $10,000 to make $50,000, which is great, what happens when that doesn't work anymore? and all of a sudden you are left with books that don't sell, and you're not making money. So I can't do that. I can't have my only source of income be because I pay people to buy my books.
Yeah.
Essentially what an ad is.
Right.
I think going back just for a moment to people not talking about craft, I think there is an element of, when you talk about craft, you are talking about subjective taste, and
Exactly.
and when you're doing it in a writing community and you are writing something that's kind of like popcorn movie, but it sells really well, and you talk about craft, the people that are truly like into craft or whatever, that see your stuff as shit, they're gonna fucking knock you down. They're gonna take shots at you. They're gonna leave bad reviews on your books. So it became sort of a firing squad, because I know authors that used to post on these forums, and they're like, whenever I talk about anything and try to help anybody, the people see my success, don't think I deserve it, think I'm a shitty writer, and they go and they tank me. So that's a reason I think some people don't talk about it, because they're gonna piss off other jealous writers that are gonna want to screw them over.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Chris isn't going to be writing any more nonfiction books, is he just didn't want to deal with the flack anymore. I've scaled way back on my post on 20 books to be inspirational, because I started getting a lot of flack, and I'm not a big enough author that if some other group of people with a large audience decided they didn't like me, I really couldn't survive that. I'd have to start over.
Like it's the more, it's just not worth it.
So you got to be careful, right? You got to help people who want help. One of the things I loved about Texas was I stayed down there in the bar until like 2 a.m. talking to all these people who had either one book out or no books out, and they all wanted help, and they all wanted to know what to do next. And it was great, because I felt like I could really help people. And I met some cool people there, like Eric. And so what I've done is I've switched from like posting on forums, trying to help people and like be inspirational and be encouraging, to just making myself available for people. Like, so I get a lot of people come to me and like, oh, hey, Jeff, how can I'm not selling books, what can I do? And, it's pretty easy to diagnose some of them. Like you can
hire my wife to do your cover design.
Well, sometimes that's happened. Sometimes, sometimes she'll have taken pity on people, because she charges $1,000 a cover for paints and $350 for pre-mades. And sometimes she'll take pity on people and go like, listen, you're not selling any books. It's because you're a terrible cover. Let me do a couple of things for you real quick that will help you, that kind of thing. And I don't charge for helping people. I want to help. But sometimes you look at their first page and you're like, let me recommend a couple of good craft books for you, to read. Because I don't want to insult anybody. I don't want to tell them their craft is terrible. Because I'm sure there are people who are further up higher level than me who look at my craft and go, dude, you suck, Yeah,
but
I'm always learning.
Done. You're never done at all.
You're never done. Yeah.
I've written 15 million words. I still ask Bonnie, please tell me what I can do better with every draft. I want to know what I can do better.
So speaking to that, and since nobody talks about craft, what craft books do you recommend to people?
Oh gosh.
Stronger.
Okay, I will tell you my favorite craft book, the one that's helped me the most, more than any of them. But I want to get it right, so hang tight with me for one second. But there are a lot. Like anything by Donald Mass is amazing, right? That guy, he was not a writer, he's an agent, right? But he is probably the most successful agent in the world. He at one point got a person a 7-figure advance based only on just talking to them. So, he knows a lot about, he has his most famous book, I think, is called Writing the Breakout Novel.
Yeah, that's it.
And then I really like his emotional craft. Yeah, I really like his emotional craft of fiction. If you're writing science fiction and fantasy, then Orson Scott Card's Writing Science Fiction and Fantasy is kind of a must-have.
Is that old Reader's Digest book from like years ago?
Maybe.
Or Writer's Digest book? Yeah, I think I have it.
So, and this, I'm going to paint a huge paintbrush here, and I don't mean it like everybody's like this, but I tend to find that indies are really good at business and okay at craft, and Trad Pup are really great at craft and okay at business. And the reason for that is they were told for years and years that you make it or break it on your craft alone, which of course is not true. In Trad, you make it or break it on whether the editor likes you or if you wrote the right book at the right time. But my absolutely favorite craft book, the one that shot my writing up to levels where I could start to see some of the mistakes that I was making and some of the things I was doing wrong, is called Writing with Emotion, Tension, and Conflict: Techniques for Crafting an Expressive and Compelling Novel by Cheryl St. John. It is one of the most eye-opening, amazing craft books I've ever read. And I've read a bunch, as you can tell. But that one's my favorite. And she's super cool. She's on Facebook. You can talk to her. She's great. It was all about tying emotion and tension together, which was, at the time for me when I read it in 2016, was kind of an eye-opener. I was like, oh, this is why my story feels flat. Because I've got an emotional arc but with no tension, or I've got tension with no emotion. So all that stuff is important.
So with Jeff naming books, maybe we circle back on the something cool and close with it, since we didn't open with it today. So
I think Dave has one.
Dave has one. I actually don't. I'm just going to abdicate today. I'm going to pass. But I know that Dave was itching. He was kind of pissed. He was like, "Wait a minute, we missed our chance for something cool."
And I don't have anything, and now we don't do something cool, and I have something.
So this can be optional, Jeff. If you listen to this and are like, "I have something cool to share," then knock yourself out. If not, you can join me.
So my something cool is a show on Netflix. I Am Not Okay With This.
Oh yes, I'm so ready for that.
Okay, so it stars the redheaded girl from and she plays a teenager that is going through some shit, and she finds out she has powers. So there's a couple of and I'm not gonna spoil anything.
It looks very Dave core.
It is, but there's a few things that when I first saw that the episodes are 20 minutes. Or 21 minutes. I was like, what? No.
I love that.
Okay. And if I didn't at first, but then like I watched it and it's very, you just keep going because there's only 7 episodes. So it's really easy to burn through those when they're 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's like a movie.
Yeah. So I watch it and I loved it so much because it was kind of, it's doing a superhero origin story in a way, but it's very intimate. It's kind of like how, Signs was an intimate alien invasion. This is about a teenage girl going through teenage girl problems. But by the way, she also has this thing that's
it's got if you liked End of the Fucking World, it's the same director, and it's also based off a comic or a graphic novel like that was.
And it's very authentic to the experience of being like an awkward teenager that I think a lot of us remember quite well, us writers anyway, and I just thought it was very well done. So go check it out. It's just 7 episodes, so you'll fly right through it. And
that's
I'm looking forward to seeing if they I know they have to do a season 2. So
I have not. They are doing a season 2. It's already been greenlit.
Good.
I haven't seen it, but it's at the top of the list. I'll probably see it by the next time we talk. My something cool is actually an older. I got 2. I'll make them quick. But the first one is more. I'm just curious if you've seen it. Have you seen Cargo, Dave?
No, I haven't. That is on my list though.
It's also super Dave core. It's got it's Martin Freeman who plays Watson on the Benedict Cumberbatch.
I know
Sherlock.
Martin.
And he's basically, it's all children in jeopardy. It's an Australian movie, and it's small. It's like an hour and a half, and he basically has to carry his child across the outback where there's zombies.
Right? Yeah.
It's so Dave.
I saw the trailer for that. That looked pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. It's a slightly different take on the zombie thing. It's done well. I like the Australian setting a lot, and there's several scenes that I'm like, somebody was reading Dave's diary.
I know what you mean when you say Dave core, but I'm picturing Dave doing parkour.
I would like to see Dave doing parkour.
I would like to see that.
Then the other one is much more sober, much more serious, but I've just started watching it. I'm only 1 episode in, but it's great. It's a docuseries on Netflix called Dirty Money. And it just talks about like how corrupt everybody is in the fucking world.
I don't need to watch that.
Yeah, no. It's also Dave Core in a totally different way. The first one I watched was on Volkswagen, who apparently like totally lied. They had these defeat devices in their diesel cars because they were actually pumping out emissions that were 50 times worse than the maximum allowable by law. And so they were just like, well, we got to sell cars. And they ended up having to pay $25 billion to the EPA and buying a bunch of cars back. But you look at the story of like how many people had to be okay with the fuckery like along the line, and it's just really.
Well, wasn't Hitler somehow tied to the bug in some way? So I mean, it's not even a joke, but when you talk about getting a bunch of people to go along with something dirty, I see some echoes there.
Yeah, well
Volkswagen means the
people's car. Yeah, it was Hitler's idea, and the first Volkswagens were for Nazis.
So you're shocked that Volkswagen had a bunch of people who were quiet about atrocities for a long time?
Well, okay, so here's the flip side of that funny story. My brother owned one of those cars, and he was getting 40, 50 miles to the gallon diesel-wise, right? Not because the computer told him, but because he did the math. It was mandatory in California for him to take it into the Volkswagen dealership for them to fix the computer. They fixed the computer, and now he's getting 20 miles to the gallon. So, yeah, good job. You cured the emissions, and now he's using 2.5 times as much gas.
Well, yeah, so the reason that is because the defeat devices change it so that this is a rabbit hole. We do not need to go down.
Yeah, right. No.
But basically, it turns it off to protect the engine. That's what's supposed to happen. But they're basically saying, save the engine, fuck the air. And you can't have both. What Volkswagen did that was so wrong is they pretended that it was magic.
They lied about it.
They lied about it. They systematically lied about it for years.
Yeah, almost everything bad in the world ends with, and they lied about it.
Right. Right. Yeah,
like
that's
the thing you did
title.
Was a mistake, right? And we all own our mistakes, or should. The thing that gets everybody in trouble is like Martha Stewart, right? And then you lied about it.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
Do you have one, Jeff, to close us out, or should we?
Gosh.
Okay, if you don't, but if
I'll tell you what, my favorite thing of last year. Thank you, Ray Romano. My favorite thing of last year had to be The Mandalorian. I don't think I have enjoyed a TV show as much as that show in a long time. So if you're one of the 5 people on the planet who has not seen The Mandalorian,
I have not.
You haven't?
More me or no me?
I don't have Disney Plus.
That's really good.
There's only 3 left. It's like the golden tickets for Wonka's Factory.
Get the free week and then binge watch it because they're only 20 to 40 minutes long. So they're kind of all over the place with length, but they're just the best TV show I've seen probably since the first season of Farscape.
Yeah, it goes back to it goes back to Star Wars roots. It feels more like a space western.
People say, I saw this meme, it was great, and they're like, oh, well, people don't like Star Wars because of nostalgia. They don't like the new trilogy because of nostalgia, because evil nostalgia. And then there's The Mandalorian, and you're like, oh, no. It's just because Mandalorian is really well written. I mean, like, it is a master class on how to write a story without dialogue.
Yeah, and the fact that, I mean, it's very Clint Eastwood, the man with no name.
Right,
you don't actually get to see his face, and he's...
I don't need to see his face because I love the Boba Fett helmet so much. That's like my favorite thing of all time.
It's badass, and you'd like it, dude. Also, Dave, it's got, like, he's upgrading his armor. It's got a little bit of RPG shit in there. Like, it's cool.
If you like the old Akira Kurosawa movies like Sanjuro and
Dave doesn't watch anything black and white. He's never. Don't even try.
You're missing out. Or the Clint Eastwood movies that were based on those, like for a few dollars more and a fistful of dollars and things like that. And you like Star Wars, you will absolutely freaking go nuts for this show. It is absolutely amazing, and it has some of the. Whoever was behind the scenes on it did an amazing job because there was stuff in that TV show that you wouldn't know unless you bought the toys or read the comics. Or watch the Clone Wars series, or it was just, there was like one point there was a piece of equipment in there that was the toy everybody wanted when I was a kid that nobody could afford because it was $40 in the 80s. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. It's a really well done show. So that's my favorite thing of last year was The Mandalorian.
Also, just to add on The Mandalorian, something that I really liked is they took some really dated shit from the original 77 film and made it look cool. So, like, the example that I'll have is, do you remember that really shitty-looking droid in the Jawa thing? It looks like a trash can.
Yeah.
Okay, that's in The Mandalorian, but in a different context to where it does a lot to bridge the gap between all the years and make it feel like a living, breathing Star Wars universe that isn't all CGI, and it feels weighted. I like it a lot.
I want to, since you brought this up, I'm going to make a confession here.
Poor Johnny. Like, we're supposed to stop.
No. We're going to get into my mental state here. The reason I have not watched most older movies is because I have an OCD thing where if I see a movie and I know that people in that movie are dead, especially if almost everyone's dead, I can't watch it.
Oh, wow.
Because I feel like that death will spread to me. It's completely irrational, illogical, insane, but it's been in my head ever since. I used to not be able to listen to music or any. If I see a picture of somebody that I know is dead.
To do me a
Dave's
favor.
living in the moment.
Yeah, you need to see Godfather before Al Pacino dies. Please, will you go see
Marlon
Godfather?
Brando's already dead. So.
Right, you already lost Brando, but that's okay. Pacino's the real star, and De Niro, he's still around
see it
too.
Before people from The Godfather start dropping, it's going to happen really soon. So can you please see The Godfather?
All right,
you've got years still for Harry Potter, but
I'm not sure that that qualifies as.
They've never seen Harry Potter.
All right, so let's finish up. So Jeff, give me the name of your book again, your nonfiction. Give me the name again.
Writing for Life, Living the Impossible Dream. And I got that name from my friend Ben, who came with me to Texas, because
we met Ben.
Yeah, so he told me, he's like, it's impossible. Everybody says that writing for a living is impossible. It's an impossible dream. And the most you'll ever make, right, is part-time money or something. And so it's an impossible dream. But I really believe that through hard work and plan and setting smart goals, anybody can do it.
And the right cover.
But if it were easy, everyone would do it. It ain't easy. It is never easy. It's always a lot of hard work. You just got to be willing to do the work.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being on. Thanks everybody for watching, listening, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was great.
Of course.
All right. Bye-bye.